I'm here to present the census that was conducted by the WFA. Before I do that, just give me a little bit of time to share with you about the organizations that actually SNAP is a member of, because I love to take the opportunity to talk about the work that Rasha and I are doing, and of course the organizations that are there. I hope I know how to work this. Okay. So a little bit about I'm going to start with the advertising business group. The advertising business group, the ABG, was actually formed quite a while ago. It was formed in 2007. At that point of time, they had a very specific mandate. So they were known as the Advertisers Business Group. So essentially, their members were only advertisers, so companies like Unilever, P&G, L'Oreal. And they had a very, very specific mandate, which was to drive media measurement. The agenda, for whatever reason, never really took off. The ABG kind of became a little defunct. So in 2015, 2016, we decided to revive it. But of course, under a different mandate. We renamed it as the Advertising Business Group. So our agenda was to include the entire, that'll be better, okay. We decided to include the entire advertising and marketing ecosystem. So the Advertising Business Group is essentially not-for-profit. We're registered under the Dubai Chamber, and our mandate is to bring about industry self-regulation. So we work on what we think are potential areas of focus. I'm not going to say issues, because what we want to do is we want the industry to self-regulate, just so that we don't have regulators stepping in, with the objective of driving increased consumer confidence, in certain specific areas. And the way we do it is by the three ways. We essentially try and set a standard. We then build the awareness around it and the capability to ensure that the industry is aware and can work together to achieve that. And the third is to, of course, provide a platform for cooperation. Actually, it's an interesting story. One of the reasons why the ABG, we decided to revive it, is because this was between 2014 and 2016. Key advertisers like Unilever, P&G, L'Oreal, there were always issues in our advertising. And what would end up happening is that the CEOs would end up sending letters to each other, and there was never a platform where they could sit down and actually discuss it. And that was primarily the reason why we decided to set up the ABG. But having said that, ever since we've set it up, we've never had an issue. So it's probably just one of the things. But it's also really incredible because, and I sit on the ABG board, and it's really incredible to see the industry come together and work together, on areas that really matter. We started with, in 2016, November, when we set up the ABG, we started with about 17 members. We've now grown ourselves to 60 members plus. You can see a whole host of advertisers, platforms. We've got agencies, research agencies, and everybody out there. So, and our members effectively kind of account for about 70% of the region's ad spend. So that's also a big responsibility on us. And these are the 5 areas that we kind of focus on with 3 key enablers. So driving media measurement is a key project that the ABG is leading on. It's something, like I mentioned, that was started in 2007, and it's very, very important for driving improved effectiveness in advertising. The second area is, of course, the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, gender unstereotyping, given the impact of advertising on culture. And the third area is digital media self-regulation. E-com and sustainability are 2 kind of new areas that we've started focusing on. And the 3 key enablers that we work with are, one is, of course, engaging the youth. So we try and work with universities, engage with the future talent that's going to come into the industry. Of course, one of the key problems in our market is that we don't have enough local research. So that's an area that we are actually looking at driving. We have worked with Zayed University in the past on 2 key research. And one of them actually provided us a business case to launch the Unstereotype Alliance. And I'll explain about the Unstereotype Alliance. We've recently actually pulled together a research group which is, they're members from across the industry, and they're the ones who are actually going to help now drive increased local research for us. And then the third one is the Disputes Resolution Committee, which is formed of individuals from NGOs, academia, and across the sector. This is the reason why we had actually set ourselves up, but ever since we've set up the Dispute Resolution Committee, we've never had to call on them. So that's a little bit about the ABG, a slide only on the Unstereotype Alliance. And the Unstereotype Alliance was actually, it was launched at Cannes in 2017. And one of the reasons actually that it was launched was because there was a research that was done by Unilever in the UK, which effectively showed that our consumers were saying we don't connect with your advertising anymore. We don't connect with the advertising that's being showcased to us, because all that the advertising is doing is it is showing individuals in your advertising as one-dimensional. So, the usual advertising we have, woman is a mother, and that's about it. She's the one who's managing the washing machine, looking after the house. That's the kind of advertising you see in our region. But what they were telling us, our consumers, is that we are so much more. I'm definitely a mother, but I'm an adventurer. I read, I run, and I am so much more. And I need to see this reflected in your advertising for me to connect. And so that was really the impetus for setting up the Unstereotype Alliance. The Unstereotype Alliance is convened by UN Women, which is the gender equality arm for the UN. And what the UN, what they have done is that they bring the industry together. So the Unstereotype Alliance is led by the industry, but we work with UN Women. And our agenda is really, it's a thought and action platform to effectively address the stereotypes and biases that advertising is reflecting. So, of course, I think all of us are within the industry. We understand that while advertising reflects culture, it also influences it. So it has a very large impact. And we have to use the power of advertising to drive the change that Sally was kind of talking about. We set up the UAE chapter we launched it in November 2020, so at the lag end of COVID. We're the 5th chapter to be launched globally, and we're very, very proud of that. And our agenda, so while the Unstereotype Alliance doesn't just look at gender, it looks at all aspects of bias, addressing bias and unstereotyping. It looks at race, color, nationality, all of those. In the UAE, we decided we, of course, had to focus on gender initially. So that's really our ambition, is to showcase more progressive portrayals of gender, and that means both men and women. We want to really help do that by addressing stereotypes and biases in media. So that's just a little bit, and let me now get to the meat, which is why I'm here, which is to present this census. So while the advertising industry has been largely aware as to how stereotypical their advertising is, one of the things that they haven't really focused on is the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion work internally. And when COVID happened, one of the great learnings that came out of it was that the largest impact of COVID was actually on women. They carried the double burden of managing both house and continuing with their professional life. And it was also what was called a shadow pandemic. There was increased violence against women. And of course, a large part, of course, in our region, and women were a lot more vocal because they didn't have any other way. And then, of course, because of the economic impact, a lot of organizations couldn't really focus on the diversity, equity, inclusion agenda. So what was really the true impact of COVID is what the what the census is actually trying to figure out. It was led by WFA, which is the World Federation of Advertisers. The ABG is a member of the WFA globally. And this was the first census that has ever been done globally on this agenda for the advertising industry. They received a great amount of support from brands, from agencies, from media, from consultancies across the board. And in 27 markets, national associations similar to the ABG actually supported this entire endeavor. And their aim was really to assess not just workforce composition, but also the perceptions in terms of what has, what is the sense of belonging and the perception of progress that the advertising industry is trying to drive. And the objective is, of course, to create the baseline, because this is not a one-off. We have actually just confirmed to the WFA that we are going to be taking part in the next one. So hopefully this is going to be ongoing and we will get better data. The reason I'm just mentioning the better data is that out of the 10,000 responses that they received globally, we received 302 from within our region. Was it good? Probably not. We're hoping to really push the industry in the second round and get more responses. The maximum amount obviously came from, not obviously, but they came from the media agency, followed by brands, creative agencies, and media and tech. You had more responses from men. Probably that's a reflection of the representation within the industry, 58% men, 42% women. With regards to ethnicity, it was primarily Arabs and Asians. And it was great to see that 6% of respondents had a disability status. So we get to see responses out there also. Now, with regards to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, a majority of them actually feel that their organizations are actually or actively driving this agenda internally. This was in the GCC, 58% of the respondents felt positively, but we're almost at the global level, which was 60%, slightly low. However, the perception was that the industry is not really doing enough. And as a result, they're likely to lose talent. Yeah? It was 19% of respondents, 8% preferred not to say anything. And was slightly lower than the global response. Now, this is an interesting chart with regards to status and pay of women in the industry. So what you'll see out here is that at the junior level, you get more women than men, and it gets completely flipped at the executive or C-suite level. So obviously, you see a lot of women are entering the industry, but as they progress, they tend to fall off the talent pipeline, right? They tend to change, they tend to leave the industry, they tend to move away, give up their careers, I don't know. And the same is reflected in the pay gap. So women, they start at a lower rate. They start catching up with their male peers. They tend to overtake their male peers. And then once they reach C-suite level, they tend to get underpaid. And I was in this SDG 5 event led by UN Women I think it was last Thursday. And I remember somebody in a panel mentioning that if you have more women at the C-suite level, women will start getting paid more. It's as simple as that. So it's imperative, besides the whole business case, I'm sure you've heard enough of it, women in 500, in companies, where they are at the C-suite level tend to perform much better. Yeah, they bring diversity of thinking, they bring a different mindset, a different way of working, and it's just good business sense. With regards to women's experiences, again, not a good study. 10% of women have experienced discrimination on account of their gender, and it's just, it's slightly above the global average, which is at 7%. 47% believe their colleagues would escalate inappropriate behavior, but there are 51% of men actually believe this is more likely to happen. And 66% feel like they belong. Probably seems like a good number, but it's not as good as what men feel. Yeah, and with regards to this, it's equal for men and women in terms of obstacles to career progression based on gender. Ethnic minorities probably feel the most constrained. 24% actually felt a higher level of discrimination because of their ethnicity, and 37% felt obstacles to their career progression. However, despite this, 68% still felt that they belonged, which is really good. And the likelihood of that happening is probably because they have good, if not equal, representation at different levels within the organizational structure. Yeah. With regards to disability, like I'd mentioned, 6% of the respondents were disabled. The great news is none of them actually experienced any form of discrimination, and however, 33% have faced obstacles in their career progression because of their disability. However, despite that, 60% felt that they belong, but it was a lower number vis-a-vis the global, which is at 68%. And the good news is 53% felt that their colleagues would escalate inappropriate behavior. And vis-a-vis 49% of their counterparts without disabilities. So they have that level of confidence. Coming to, this is really the last slide. I think ageism, as Sally was mentioning, not talked about enough, and it definitely plays a role in the industry. And it, 30%, 31% women respondents, they did not believe that their company treats all employees equally, regardless of family status. So family status obviously comes into play with regards to pay, with regards to career progression, same with treating employees equally, regardless of the age. And 29% of women actually felt that their family status, which is having kids, actually is a hindrance to their career progression. So just as a conclusion, overall, the GCC is amongst one of the leading regions which is kind of embracing change. And we saw some pretty good feedback from people who had a disability. They really didn't feel any level of discrimination against them on account of that. However, there are 3 key metrics that we score slightly below the global average, and this is really with regards to the inclusion, sense of belonging, and absence of discrimination. Again, given the fact that there were 302 responses, we are hoping that in the next stage, we can really shore this up and really get some really, really good feedback so as to, kind of prepare that baseline for ourselves as an industry and prepare an action plan going forward. So that's it. Thank you.